In the heart of a war-ravaged Germany, behind polished boots and iron salutes, a storm was brewing. It was not the Allies nor the Soviets, but Germans themselves, high-ranking officers and statesmen, who were beginning to fear their own leader more than their enemies. They called it Operation Valkyrie, what began as a contingency plan to maintain order in the event of internal unrest had, by 1944, been twisted into something else, a last, desperate attempt to assassinate Adolf Hitler and seize control of the crumbling Third Reich from within. At its center was Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg, a nobleman, a devout Catholic, and a decorated war hero. Stauffenberg had seen enough. The atrocities committed in Russia, the brutal persecution of Jews, and the totalitarian madness gripping his homeland had turned his patriotism into rebellion. But rebellion in Nazi Germany came at a price. On a hot July afternoon, at Hitler's Wolfslair headquarters in East Prussia, Stauffenberg entered a high-level military briefing with a simple leather briefcase in hand. Inside was a British-made explosive, primed to detonate just minutes after activation. He placed it carefully beneath the conference table and left the room. Moments later, the bomb exploded. Flames and smoke filled the air. Wooden beams collapsed, chaos ensued. And yet Hitler survived, miraculously shielded by a heavy oak table leg. He emerged wounded but very much alive, staggering but furious. The plot had failed, but the consequences had only just begun. As Stauffenberg raced back to Berlin, he was convinced Hitler was dead. The coup was activated, communications sent, SS units ordered to stand down, key officials arrested for a few short hours. Germany was suspended in uncertainty. But when word spread that Hitler had spoken on the radio, his voice gravelly but unmistakably alive, the dream of a free Germany collapsed in an instant. The conspirators were arrested by nightfall. Stauffenberg, along with General Friedrich Olbricht and others, were executed by firing squad that same night in the courtyard of the Bendeler block, their rebellion extinguished before it even caught fire. But Hitler's vengeance had only begun. What followed was a purge drenched in paranoia and cruelty. Over 7,000 people were arrested in connection with the plot. Of them, nearly 5,000 were executed. The trials were presided over by Roland Freisler, president of the infamous People's Court, a man who shouted more than he judged. Freisler turned the courtroom into a stage of humiliation and degradation. Defendants were insulted, mocked, screamed at, stripped of dignity. They stood in their underclothes while their characters were assassinated before their bodies would follow. These trials weren't about justice. They were about spectacle, and the final act was execution. For many of the conspirators, the method of death was chosen not for efficiency, but for suffering. They were hanged with thin piano wire, not dropped, but hoisted slowly by the neck, the wire cutting into flesh, strangling breath minute by minute. Others were suspended from meat hooks in Berlin's Plötzensee prison, left to die in agony. But the true horror, Hitler had the executions filmed. He watched them privately, repeatedly, deriving satisfaction from each gasping. Thrashing death, to him this was not punishment. It was pleasure, a warning to any who dared challenge his rule. Hitler's fury extended beyond the conspirators. Families were arrested, children taken, wives and brothers detained under the ancient Germanic concept of Sippenhaft, kin liability. To be related to a traitor was now a crime. Even Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, was caught in the dragnet. Though not directly involved in the bombing, his knowledge of the plot and popularity made him dangerous. He was given a choice: suicide and a hero's funeral, or a public trial and execution. He chose the former, swallowing cyanide. The Reich announced he had died from war injuries. The men of July 20th did not live to see Hitler fall. Most Germans never even knew what they tried to do. The Nazi propaganda machine had painted them as cowards, traitors, oath breakers. But history has remembered differently. Today, in modern Germany, their names are spoken with reverence. Streets are named for them. Their sacrifice taught that true patriotism does not mean blind obedience. It means moral courage, even in the face of death. In the Bendeler block where Stauffenberg fell, there stands a memorial. Etched into stone, you did not bear the shame. You resisted, you gave the great forever sign. Execution by piano wire, a method as cruel as the man who ordered it. But behind the brutality lies a story of defiance, of men who, with everything to lose, chose to say no when it mattered most. Their deaths were meant to inspire fear. Instead, they became a symbol of courage.